Welcome to this video on economy and accessibility of rural areas. Inequalities between urban and rural areas are significant. Rural areas are often considered unattractive because there are less jobs, less opportunities, and some sectors, such as agriculture, are in crisis. However, many rural areas have amenities and opportunities to engage a new economic dynamic. The problem is how to find these amenities. Indeed, it is sometimes difficult to assess potentialities of rural areas because we lack of statistics concerning the countryside, and scientific research is still too scarce on certain economic and social issues in rural areas. So, how to analyze strengths and weaknesses of a rural region? And how can you make your own territorial diagnosis? Some key concepts can help to answer to this question. We will focus on 4 key concepts: settlement, place-based resources, accessibility, and territorial balance. First, settlement. A settlement and the administrative structure that goes with it are 2 very important elements to understand the socio-economic situation of a rural area. A settlement is the result of the political and social history of the region, and its character also impacts on local development and economic prospects. In rural areas, populations are often structured on a local scale around villages and small towns. Their connections to city divide rural areas in 3 groups: isolated rural area close to the city, and peri-urban areas. These different types of rural areas have different strengths and weaknesses. For example, rural areas near Paris in France have very strong local activities because the urban population drives local economy. But urban sprawl also threaten rural population and causes conflicts between city dwellers and farmers. It is therefore necessary to be aware of your region's settlement characteristics to better understand its strengths and weaknesses. Watch out, it is important to avoid clichés and shortcuts concerning countryside. A sparsely populated area isolated from large cities can use its remoteness as an asset for tourist activities. For example, mountain areas, which are difficult to access and have a small and scattered rural population, attract tourists in summer and winter. Second key concept, place-based resources. The concept of place-based resources highlights the distinctiveness of places, the goods and services they produce, and the diversification of the rural economy into multiple sectors. According to this concept, the rural area is seen as a territory where any characteristic, natural, social, economical, geographical, can be seen as a potential for local development. The action of local population can also be considered place-based resources in a bottom-up perspective. A rural area is never completely remote. It is always in relation with other neighboring territories or with more distant stakeholders at different scales, the state, for example. So, a region's potential also comes from networks and links between local resources and the outside world. Local resources are enriched and complete by external resources, and these resources can lead to interaction between newcomers and local populations. Indeed, the hybridization of population types, that is to say social diversity, geographical diversity, cultural origin diversity, allows a considerable enrichment of local resources. Third key concept, accessibility. Accessibility generally refers to the accessibility of resources, infrastructure and transport, as well as people's mobility. Issues of mobility and access to resources clearly show the inequalities between rich and poor population, and more generally, between rural and urban population. Rural populations face particular difficulties. Public transport is often underdeveloped or poorly adapted to their needs. Cars require a substantial budget, which has a particular impact on the poorest people. And finally, in rural areas, there are less infrastructures and services, both public and private, compared to cities. Finally, fourth key concept, territorial balance. To better understand a territory, it is necessary to take into account its different activities and geographical characteristics, and to see how they can be linked together while respecting the aspirations of each. Of course, developing activities and housing is important, but we also need to know how to preserve agriculture and natural land. Indeed, in rural areas in general, and especially in those close to cities, natural areas are increasingly threatened, which creates ecological and food autonomy problems. It is necessary to determine the most suitable balance between agricultural, natural, and built-up land for the well-being of local populations. In conclusion, when mapping accessibility and economy of a region, it is necessary to understand historical and geographical context of a region's settlements. What are the region's settlement characteristics? What is the evolution of the settlement and its current dynamics? It is also necessary to define important place-based resources, their potentials, and how to develop them without forgetting to consider how they connect to the national level. The third point to remember is to understand a region's issues with mobility and accessibility. And finally, it is important to find the right territorial balance. What are the important geographical and economical characteristics of a region? Which areas need to be protected, which areas need to be developed.